expecting me to be sitting here for today's video, and I usually sit just here. I'm in the same studio. So I thought I'd join you today for a more impromptu video. I'm going to share with you what's going on in Knit with Hannah at the moment and what I'm knitting. I don't generally do what I'm knitting videos. I thought this might be helpful for beginners if you're just starting out, and for anyone who's just looking for some inspiration. January can be a month in the year when we are sitting there going, I've got a whole year to knit. What am I going to put on my needles? And winter can feel like there's a need to look out for spring patterns and summer patterns. Winter feels like it's not going to last much longer. So what's the point of continuing to knit winter items? So I'm going to share with you what I'm knitting and just guide you into perhaps choosing some of them for yourself, some of these ideas for yourself, and I'll show you in this how much further ahead I'm knitting. And I do have something to share with you later, which will impact the next couple of weeks' videos. So I just wanted to let you know what's going on in January here on the YouTube channel as well. And we'll get to that later. But first of all, what am I knitting and why? So the first thing I'm knitting, and this can be really helpful for beginners actually, is always having a small project on the needles. But this small project is actually a long-term small project, which sounds completely oxymoron of a phrase, but I'll show you why. I'm knitting squares. So these squares, I will probably share more of these in the future, so you'll be able to knit some too. But these squares will come together and form a large item, a blanket. I have 2 blankets that I'm really happy with that are made up of squares. So that's 2 blankets that are made up of squares. That's my printer making an interesting noise. Excuse me. I have 2 blankets that are made up of squares. Nothing like this. They are corner to corner squares that we've made in blankets before as well here on Knit with Hannah. But these are lovely items that I've just made a pattern up myself. It's lovely wool. I fell in love with this last summer. It's the felted tweed Aran. I have knitted with it way ago in the past. I'd pretty much forgotten it. And then I was diving into yarn that I'd purchased to have in the shop, and I was getting ready for the rainbow cowl which we knitted along together in September. And all of a sudden it came to me, that's not DK. That's not the thinner yarn that we need for the cowl. I had 2 bags of Aran weight yarn. I'd ordered them on purpose and I'd completely forgotten that I'd ordered them. And they were just sat at the bottom of the box waiting for me to knit with them. And I knew this is what they were for, but they're also for something else that I'll show you in a minute. So squares have come out of that. I absolutely love knitting squares because it's a short project. I can say I don't really want to get into the whole where am I in this pattern, oh my goodness, there's a whole lot to think about, blah blah blah. For a larger item, this just lets me sit there and I can knit one of these within a few hours, and I might actually knit one or half of these, half of a square, maybe when I'm sat there in an evening. It's a lovely thing to cast on and get going with in an evening, and then finish it the next day, or even finish it that evening if I just feel like knitting for the next couple of hours. So that is going along well. I've got 4 colours I'm knitting with, and they're all going to be mixed up. It's going to be a nice winter blanket, and we can use it on the bed, we can use it on the sofa. I'm really looking forward to having that more body to it. I have 2 patterns of squares so far. I'm going to make 2 more very likely, and I actually have some of these squares blocking over in the living room right now. So that's one thing that I'm knitting. I am knitting with that yarn for a second project, and that has come out of those big bags of yarn, and that was why I bought those big bags of yarn, and it is this. So this is something that I recommend. If you want to knit something large, then have it on your needles alongside something else. This is the lovely knitting pattern photograph. This pattern on the front drew me to this magazine back in 2008. I knitted it almost immediately. I got the magazine in a Debbie Bliss tweed, and I absolutely loved it, I must say. I wore it and wore it and wore it, and it's been and gone, basically, because it must have got holy and very worn, and yeah, it's lovely. But if I can find another colour in another pattern photograph in here, I will share it with you. Yeah, there it is. You can see quite clearly the cable that goes up the bag, up the arms, it goes up the 2 fronts, and it goes in the back. So there's cabling all over it, but it's quite a restrictive cable because there's lots of stocking stitch either side, and that means that my fingers, if you watched last week's video, then you'll know I can't do cable all the way along a piece of knitting, but I can do larger pieces of cable if there's a lot of variety and a lot of plain knitting against it as well. One thing that I avoid is cabling when there's lots of moss stitch involved as well, because my fingers just cannot do that. So that's one thing. I have the right front on my needles right now, and I have just completed the ribbing. I expect to be getting on with that right front quite well when I see you next. So yeah, so that's the large item that's on my needles right now. It's the same yarn as before. Generally speaking, I like to have 3 different yarns on my needles. It's not a rule that I absolutely stick with, obviously, because I haven't stuck with it right now. But yeah, it's really useful to have a variety of yarns, so I can pick one up depending on my mood, depending on how my fingers feel. And it's just nice to have a change from one to the other. It means I might be knitting with a different needle size. Coincidentally, all of the needles that I'm knitting with right now are pretty much the same size. I'm knitting with medium needles. What I'm also knitting is Shiny Happy Cotton by Wool and the Gang. The reason I have this on my needles is I have a deadline, so it's for a gift, and the deadline, well, we don't know exactly because it's for baby, but I'd like to get this to the parents before the baby comes, so they can rest assured that they have a baby blanket. But yes, this is what I'm knitting, and this is the bubble baby blanket that I created back in 2008, very likely, I think, and I'm knitting it in 2 colours. I've done this before and I really enjoyed it, and there's not a lot of moving yarn across the back or anything like that. So it's just this, there are just 2 rows where I do this at the beginning and at the end of the pattern, and then I have the borders in one colour and the centre of it in another, but I just thought I'm going to do this in 2 colours, why not? And yeah, I feel that it's okay to have a different colour, it's okay to have a different yarn, and it's okay to have 3 things on the needle at once. And if you are a beginner knitter, then it can be helpful to just move into that acceptance that that's okay. But it's also, if you're a beginner, can be a bit complicated if you suddenly go, I'm definitely going to have more than one thing on my needles at once. I'm going to have 3 things and keep going with all of them. That can be tough. As a knitter, you build up into this. So there's definitely one thing I would do. I would start with one thing on your needles. And that's that. And you'll find that you can focus on it. When you pick it up, you knit with it, and it doesn't get left behind. And then if you find that you're just not picking it up and it doesn't feel right, then you can start something else. And you never know, it might not be that this one isn't right for you, it just wasn't right for you right now. This is what I find. The cardigan that I'm knitting got so far, and then I had to just let it go for a few weeks, and I was knitting something else. That was okay. It wasn't because I wanted to abandon it. It was because I'd kind of half fallen out of love with it, but also I just needed to reassess why I was knitting it in the first place. Finding the why can be really helpful. Finding the reason to say, yes, I'm knitting this, can be really helpful. So there's definitely a case of don't abandon something, don't put it in the naughty corner just because you don't feel like knitting it right now. Let it just sit and move through something else. More likely than not, you'll come back to it because that love and that why will return. So definitely it's something to think about. And as a beginner, it can be that the current thing on your needles just feels a bit much. You've fallen out of love with it, and knitting something else either at the same time or just for a time instead can just bring that love back. You're not going to desperately lose your place or desperately not know what you're doing if you've picked beginner patterns. Also, if you find you're knitting something that is way beyond your skill set, that's okay too. Go and knit something that improves those skills, so the current knit that you feel like you want to abandon will feel easier when you return to it. There are lots of different tactics and logical steps you can take, but so much of this is from the heart. It's saying, does this feel right now? What would I like to pick up and knit now? At the moment, I'm feeling the tiredness, almost like I don't drink alcohol, so I don't know what a hangover feels like. But, you know, it's the expression, it feels like a hangover from Christmas. It's a hangover from holiday. So I'm definitely feeling that. I've never really got the January blues in the past, so this feels a bit weird. But it's the tiredness. It's because I've had long COVID, and I know that hasn't completely gone yet. So definitely doing that a little bit more, or being with other people more, just a couple of times over Christmas, and not anything big. But yeah, it's definitely meant that I need easy things to knit. So more often, like I said, oh great, I've got rib to do for the first step of the right front on my cardigan. I'm happy to do that. I'm excited about that. That felt brilliant. And it might take me a while before my energy can pick up a bit before I'm ready to move on with the cabling. I'm also happy to knit those small squares. They're lovely to knit because, yes, if I make a mistake, it's a square. It's not a whole blanket that's going to completely be ruined. It's a square. I can completely unravel it and start that square again without feeling completely annihilated by my tiredness. So that's great. I really enjoy that kind of thing when I'm feeling tired. The baby blanket too. It's a familiar knit. It's a familiar yarn. And I can go through that pattern very likely blindfolded because I love it so much and I've knitted it so much. It's just a case of being able to count the rows occasionally and knowing that it's a bobble row or it's not a bobble row. And I love the idea of just seeing the colours change too. Doing it in 2 colours was a purposeful decision to say, yeah, give yourself variety, give yourself some interest, and have a bit of fun with it. So that's the only thing I'm knitting at the moment that's in multiple colours at once on my needles. That's something too. If you're going to do that all over the place in all of your knits, it might feel like too much. So mix up the skills. I definitely have mixed up the skills here. I have some plain and some cable squares. I have my ribbing, my shaping, and my more complicated cables in the cardigan. When I have the energy, when I have the enthusiasm, I can knit that, and it feels really good to get further on it. When I feel I just want a familiar yarn, a familiar pattern, a really lovely knit because I know who's going to get it at the end, then I go for the baby blanket. So there are lots of different whys when you're knitting, lots of different reasons to just pick things. And I mean, this is what we're doing in the Knitties masterclass at the moment. It's picking what's next on the needles by putting lots of things in place, so we have lots of answers relatively quickly. We don't have to sit there and get confused over what's happening next and what's on the needles next. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this movement through what's on my needles right now, and I hope I've given you some inspiration as well to say what can be on my needles, what is on my needles, why is it there, and the fact that if you fall out of love with something, it doesn't have to be disastrous. You don't have to abandon it completely. You will come back to it more than likely if it was made with good choices, good whys, and good reasons in the first place, and with your heart in the first place. That's why I'm knitting a baby blanket. My heart said, there's a new baby in the family, I have to knit a baby blanket, no question. So that was, that was an easy yes. Now, what's happening on Knit with Hannah? I need to take a couple of weeks off. I've already told you I'm tired. But I definitely need to take a couple of weeks off. If you want to still hear from me, take a look in the community posts. I will be dropping some things in there over the next couple of weeks. And also join the email list, because I'll be chatting with you there. Some weeks more often than others. Generally I do 2 emails a week. Sometimes I do more over a weekend if I want to share more with you, because I'm excited about something. Then I will write 3 or 4 emails over a weekend, and you can get all scrummy and knitty with me. But yeah, do join the email list. It's there for you. If you're a beginner, then I'll leave the link below for the 6 beginner mistakes to avoid. That's a PDF and an email series to help you as you start your knitting journey. So I'll leave the email link for anyone who just wants to join the email list, and you'll start getting all of those regular emails. I'll also leave the email link for the 6 beginner mistakes. Go and get that. Go and get started and enjoy that email series and the downloadable PDF that will just help you avoid some of those mistakes. And yeah, won't be videos for a couple of weeks. That's okay. I like to share with you the fact that I knit and I live my life how it needs to be lived, rather than because something is forcing me to live it in a particular way. Being on YouTube doesn't mean I have to release a video every week. The algorithms may not like me for it, but I know you still love me. And I'm still knitting. Yay! And we're all still knitting together. Thank you so much for being here. And if you do want more of me, more videos, overexcited, then join the Winter Knitting Retreat. I'll leave that link below too. That's a video every single day. Can you get enough of Hannah? So yeah, I'll leave that link below as well. It is still winter. We are still resting, relaxing. Let me just say it. I need to rest. Let's rest and retreat together. So yeah, I'm taking a couple of weeks off. Well, I can. I'm allowed to. It's my business. It's my channel. So I'm hoping that you will be back with me. I'm hoping I will be back on the first week of February. But yeah, for the next 2 weeks, the 17th and the 24th and the 31st, I will not be here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being on my email list. Thank you for your support and watching videos. Yeah, I love you for that. All knitters together. Yay. I will see you again soon and love you and leave you. Bye for now.